The four key pieces of Marketo Engage email template syntax are elements, variables, modules, and the container. I'll go through these one at a time and talk about how they work and what they might be used for. One note is that Marketo Engage syntax works only in templates and email assets. It won't function in snippets or tokens. Here's a glimpse at where the four syntax types appear in the email editor. Elements are the fundamental pieces of editable email assets. They create the areas in your template that you define as editable content. There are four types of elements: rich text, images, snippets, and videos. I'll be spending a lot more time going into each of these in detail. Elements can be used on their own, as was the case several years ago before Marketo Engage's Editor 2.0 came out, or inside a module, which I'll talk about later. You can see elements outlined in a long dotted red line in this screenshot, as well as individual chunks in the canvas, the main editor window, and also in the content tab on the right-hand side. Rich text elements allow the user to edit content using the rich text editor, a WYSIWYG, or what you see is what you get interface. It's this pop-up window with a toolbar similar to Word or other document editing software. It's probably the most familiar to users. It's highly flexible due to the buttons in the toolbar, which enable everything from changing the font formatting to inserting images and even editing HTML code. As a bonus, snippets, which I'll talk about later, can also be placed by the user into a rich text element. It's all or nothing when it comes to the rich text editor. You can't hide any of the toolbar buttons. So use policies and procedures to guide your users on proper usage. For example, I included in documentation to not use the text underline tool, since it could be confusing to email recipients who are used to underline text being linked. Having guidelines can also be a relief to users who aren't very comfortable with designing or styling an email and want a little more structure. An image element provides a simple means of inserting an image in the layout. Users will have the option of selecting an image from the design studio, uploading a new image, or referencing the URL of an image stored elsewhere online. In most cases, it's a better choice than expecting users to leverage the Insert Image toolbar button in the rich text element. For one thing, you can upload a new image without having to navigate away to Design Studio and then back to the email editor. Also, you can more clearly work out where in the layout the image should be if you have an image element. In the rich text editor, the image's placement could be fluid and even accidentally moved. Image elements are used for hero images or any other areas in a layout where an image is an integral part. A video element allows a user to insert a YouTube or Vimeo video by pasting in the URL. Unlike the image element, this isn't easily done via a button on the rich text element toolbar. Marketo Engage will automatically generate a thumbnail image with a play button overlay, so you don't have to spend the time creating and uploading an image. In your email asset, it's a linked image that opens the video in a browser. It doesn't play natively within the email client. Snippet elements allow a user to select a snippet from the design studio. While you can place a snippet in a rich text element too, a snippet element can only have a snippet. You can't replace a snippet element with a rich text element. So it offers a little more control with all the benefits of snippets. And I'll speak more to snippets later on in this session. Variables are the next key piece of Marketo Engage syntax. They're used to insert a value selected by the user into the email code wherever the variable is placed. It can be used for an HTML attribute, think of characteristic or quality such as font size, or for the actual text content, which will then be formatted in the HTML. Variables generally reduce the risk of stray styles or code being pasted in compared to the rich text element. There are 7 types of variables: string, list, number, color, Boolean, HTML block, and image. You can see variables outlined in a green dotted line in the screenshot in the Content tab on the right sidebar. While you see the variables in action on the canvas, you can't actually select them there. If you're familiar with tokens, you may be thinking these sound similar, and you're right. Both variables and tokens insert a value into the code wherever they're placed. However, variables live at a different level, on the email asset itself. They can be global, meaning they apply to all modules in an email asset, or local, meaning they apply to a single module. I'll talk about modules and tokens more later in the session. For now, know that variables keep users within the email editor interface. The first variable type is the string variable. These allow users to type or paste in plain text in a single line. This is similar to a text token type if you're familiar with that. String variables are great for areas where you want the user to enter text but not to format it. Some examples are the text and the link URL for a styled call to action button, or for a headline. List variables allow users to pick from a defined set of options in a drop-down menu. Some use cases include a limited set of color options or a limited set of font sizes. Keep in mind that the value the user sees will be the exact value in the HTML, so it will need to be fairly intuitive. Number variables have a small text box in which a number can be typed, and/or the user can increase or decrease the number by clicking the arrows. Number variables are great for font size and spacing, as those need to be numbers. However, they do allow any number to be entered, so a different method, such as a list variable, will be better if you want to allow limited options. A color variable shows a short text field in which the user can type in a hexadecimal color code, as well as a color swatch that opens into a color picker window. In the color picker, the user can manually click to visually select any color or enter RGB values for a specific color. As with number variables, this is open-ended. If you want to lock down the options for users to select from, another solution such as list variable may be preferable. A Boolean variable shows a toggle switch to the user. This could be used to select between 2 options, such as this example of referencing either the image that has the logo in blue or the alternate image that has the logo in black. It isn't recommended to use Boolean variables to show or hide pieces of an email because different email clients may not keep items hidden. HTML block variables allow the user to enter HTML from the editor window without touching the HTML for the whole email asset. They could be used for tracking pixels or situations where there is HTML content being generated from an outside source, such as an events feed, and you want users to be able to copy and paste it into a Marketo engaged email asset. Using an HTML block variable, rather than the user just editing the code of an email asset, protects the template code more. The HTML can only be added or edited where the variable is referenced in the template. Image variables allow the user to select an image from the image library, otherwise known as Design Studio, You might use this instead of an image element if it's in the background rather than its own block within the layout. Modules are the building blocks of your email asset layout. They're pre-built template sections that you drag and drop to create your email. Modules stack vertically. You can place them above or below each other and move the order of them, but they don't move from side to side. Modules can contain elements and variables that can be edited by the user, as well as other code. In this screenshot, modules are outlined in the blue dotted line. They are generally a broader chunk in the canvas compared to elements, and they appear also in the Modules tab in the right sidebar. Modules became part of Marketo Engage email syntax about 5 years ago. Before that, you could achieve layout variations using rich text elements. Now you can have rich text elements nestled inside modules. However, it's easier to achieve precision and consistency with modules rather than with rich text elements alone. Modules can be built to be responsive to different screen sizes within themselves, letting them reliably flow and stack as needed. Having constraints in the form of modules can provide guardrails and help users be more confident. The blank slate of a rich text element can be too overwhelming for those uncomfortable making major layout design decisions. Directly tied to modules is the container, which appears in the gold dotted line in this screenshot. It's found only in the canvas. You can have only one container area in a template. All of the modules for the template must be inside the container. They can't be anywhere outside of the container. Also, the container can contain only modules. You can't place anything else inside the container. This sounds a little abstract, so let's use an analogy to illustrate these principles. Burgers. Lots of people love eating them with friends. I personally like the veggie kind, but putting together burgers at a make-your-custom burger shop will hopefully make modules and containers come to life for us. The container in our Marketo Engage email template is the bun for our burger. The modules in our email template are like the patty and fixings that go inside the bun. Each time we order a custom burger, we get one bun and choose what patty and fixings we want to put inside of it. So let's go to the burger shop and people watch, and we'll learn a bit about modules and containers in the process. I'd like it with lettuce and pickles and mustard between the patty and the lettuce so it doesn't get the bun soggy. No onions this time, please. Our lesson here is that you can select whichever modules you want and to insert in your email asset and arrange them in the order you choose. I'm feeling ravenous. I'd like 2 patties, 2 slices of cheese, and 2 layers of pickles. The lesson is that the same modules can be used multiple times within the email asset. I'd like a bun between 2 patties and ketchup poured all over it. Actually, put the plate between the pieces of bun too. What? Modules can be inserted only within the container, and only modules can be inside the container. I'd like a burger with cranberry sauce. I'm sorry, we don't have cranberry sauce. Can't you make it just this one time? Unfortunately not. Maybe if enough customers request it, we'll add it to the options. Our lesson here is that you can insert modules only that already exist in the template. The template would have to be modified to include a new type of module. I want 5 patties, 10 slices of cheese, 3 layers of lettuce and tomato, every kind of sauce. And then that person comes back 2 minutes later. My kid said it was too big to eat and then it toppled over onto the floor. Lesson here is that just because you can add as many modules as you want in a single email asset doesn't mean it's a good idea to do so. The recipients may not digest it. So I talked about what goes inside the container, modules, but what about outside the container element? One thing to keep in mind is that you can't force the order of modules. They can be arranged and rearranged however you like within the container. So for pieces of your email asset that need to be in a certain place, say a branded header or footer, those might be best served outside of the container. And I'll talk about some solutions for that next. So now I'll talk about snippets and tokens. So snippets and tokens are not formally email template syntax, but they can be powerful tools to enhance your scalable email template strategy. Snippets and tokens can increase efficiency and consistency across your email assets. I mentioned snippets before when we were talking about elements. Snippets are blocks of pre-coded content that are saved in Design Studio. They can be inserted into the place of either a snippet element or a rich text element. They can, however, include token references, and that's where the risk could come in. Otherwise, you can't edit snippets on the spot. Because they're pre-coded, there is little to no risk of stray styles or code being inserted. As I mentioned, the exception might be if you're referencing tokens in your snippet. With snippets, there is no risk of approved content being modified. So some use cases for this include branded headers, standardized footers, legalese like privacy notice, unsubscribe link, or terms and conditions, or maybe the CEO's bio. Even if the standardized content may change in the future, snippets make it easy to update. You'd edit the snippet in one place, and the updates will appear across all email assets that use the snippet, old or new. Some examples could be the corporate address and social media icons or links. If they're part of a snippet, you can quickly update them when you move offices or a new social media platform launches. Here are some more snippet tips. If a user has permissions to view a snippet, they can use it in any snippet or rich text element. I recommend using naming conventions and documentation to guide users to proper snippet usage, such as those that are interchangeable and intended to be used in a specific area. Prefixes in snippet names can be used to keep similarly used snippets together as they appear in the snippet picker in alphanumeric order. For example, header ABC and header Acme could represent two options for a snippet to be used in the header area of an email. While it's likely to come up on occasion, one cannot change that one little thing just this time in a snippet. A change to the snippet will impact everywhere the snippet has been and will be used. You'd have to make a new snippet for each exception, and that may not be sustainable. When you do make changes to a snippet, don't forget to edit the plain text tab too. Unlike an email asset, it doesn't automatically copy over to the plain text. Now I'm going to talk about tokens. Tokens are similar to variables, which I shared about earlier, in that they insert a value wherever it is referenced. One difference is where the tokens live and are populated, not in the email editor on an individual email asset. There are person, system, and custom tokens. You may be familiar with person tokens if you populated a person's first name in the salutation to your email. These values are fixed in the database and aren't edited from email to email. System tokens are also predetermined, such as a program's ID number. Custom tokens are the ones where the user can define the value on the program or use whatever value is inherited from the folder. Any of these token types can be incorporated into a template, either in the default content inside an editable area or in the non-editable areas of a template. You can also reference tokens in a snippet. One use case for a folder-level inherited token is copyright year. On the Marketo Engage community, there's a script that can be used to keep it perpetually current. Examples of tokens you will probably need to edit for each program include an event registration URL and a program or campaign reference number. Note that program ID is also available as a system token, but you can't modify or append it. Be sure that there are default values defined for the tokens you reference in snippets and templates, especially for custom tokens. So now I'm going to bring together some of these pieces while talking about template best practices. With all these different pieces and options that can go into templates, here's some questions to help you consider what will be important for your organization's template strategy. Do your users need more flexibility or more guidance? This may relate to their level of tech savviness. How frequently does your organization's needs or brand shift? You may not want to invest significant effort in a very detailed template while you're still figuring out what you'll need. What kind of content does the organization send via email? If you never send videos, you probably don't need to build the video element into your templates. A more open or flexible approach may be useful when you are still trying to determine what your organization's needs are, or if they are changing very quickly, and your users are rather savvy. As I mentioned earlier in the session, rich text elements really offer almost everything. You can even edit the HTML from the rich text editor. If your organization's template needs are very clear, the organization is more strict about its image, and/or users may need more guidance in using Marketo Engage, you may want to adopt a more controlled approach to templates. Some examples are using string variables rather than rich text elements for short lines of text, such as a headline. If you have specific colors in your visual identity or a limited range of font sizes you want people to use, list variables may be better than color and number variables. Snippets and Boolean variables really lock things down so users can select only from specified chunks of content. If your organization has a very limited set of very specific email asset types, you could consider creating separate templates for these specific purposes to take the guesswork about how the layout should be built. However, I personally prefer an all-in-one modular template. You can always create clonable programs with pre-edited email assets inside to represent these specific purpose layouts. So if you plan it well, a single template can support all your organization's emails. The modular format allows you to create infinite layouts from a single template. This can be helpful to users. There's less guesswork as to what template they should use if there's only one. Having a single email template also makes it easier to update if needed. Within your templates, there are multiple opportunities to guide users via default settings. Use logical, descriptive naming conventions for everything from templates to modules, variables, snippets, and tokens. Don't make users guess what module 01 is for. In image elements, you can insert a default image that includes the recommended dimensions. Placeholder.com is one easy source for this. In variables, set the default attributes to what will be useful for users. For example, in number variables, you can provide the unit label, such as pixels, and make the increments a helpful amount, either 1 pixel, 5 pixels, 10 pixels. On a template, you can choose which modules available for the template will appear in the email asset by default. This is built into the template's code. The rest of the modules that don't appear by default will still be available on the side. Users can remove the default modules, so if something absolutely must appear in the email, you may want it to live outside the modules and container, say in a snippet. A totally different approach is to create token-based templates, which are really more of a program approach than a true Marketo Engage template as I defined at the beginning of the session. Essentially, everything that changes between individual email assets, text, images, colors, links, and so on, are entered on the program's My Tokens tab. The user never goes into the email editor on the email asset itself. This approach can work for highly templated email assets such as an event registration confirmation email, where only the event name, time, and location might change. You might already have these values as tokens on the event program anyway. Token-based templates have their limitations though. Any deviations outside what's in the tokens would require going into the email editor on the asset anyway, so it's not always a time saver. Also, its format may not be as intuitive to users who are used to WYSIWYG editors. You can't see what it is that you're changing until you preview the email asset. It doesn't even appear in the email editor. Be sure to thoroughly test and debug templates before releasing them to users. Make sure that modules are responsive on different screen sizes, such as a side-by-side layout, how a side-by-side layout stacks on mobile. Account for your audience's email clients, browsers, and devices. Testing the template can help you catch and fix major bugs, but you'll still need to test every individual email asset created from the template. It's still possible to enter content that can cause rendering issues, especially in the rich text editor. For example, pasting in formatted text from Word can result in a lot of junk style tags. You might notice rendering issues that arise from changes in email clients or browsers or with a newly released device. While the goal of having a template strategy in place is to develop it once and then focus on campaign strategy, there may be the occasional need to update a template. As I just mentioned, an email client or browser update may lead to a rendering issue. After a template has been in place for a while, users may flag some new needs that aren't necessarily accommodated in the best way within the current template. As these incidents happen, you'll want to plan a template update. Here are some notes about what happens when you update a template. A draft will be made on each email asset that had been created from the template. You'll have to approve those drafts for the template changes to affect those live assets. If you made changes within the editable areas of the template, in other words, the default content, it will not appear in the existing email assets, not even in those drafts that were created. Only new email assets created going forward will have that new default content. If you turn off the editability of a section, it will remove any of the content you had entered in that section on any email. So before you make changes to the template, check the Use By tab on the template to see what email assets will be affected. Of course, there's a specific category of permissions just for templates. You'll need to edit and approve access in order to make these changes. Whether you're using a more flexible or a fairly strict approach with your templates, or if you have very complex or rather simple templates, documentation will be important. You'll want to include screenshots and a description of what is available in each template, how to use it, and also what users should avoid doing. This will be a useful guide for the users leveraging the template. Don't forget to create documentation from the admin and/or developer standpoints as well. It can be helpful to note why templates were set up a particular way versus another. So we've come to the end of our session. Here are 3 key takeaways about Marketo Engaged email templates. Firstly, email syntax offers a variety of options for the email editing experience. There are sometimes multiple ways to accomplish the same thing. Secondly, a scalable template strategy is more than just an email template as we defined it at the beginning of the session. Don't forget things like snippets and tokens, and strive towards building a center of excellence. Lastly, do what makes sense for your organization and users. It's okay to not use all the different options and possibilities in your template strategy just because they exist. They're just tools in the toolbox. Thank you so much. And now we have some time for Q&A.
We do. Beth, thank you so much for the overview of templates. And I think it's something that we've all, as practitioners, have struggled with at one point or another. How do you balance the flexibility and usability of the templates within Marketo? It's definitely not intuitive for people who don't speak Marketo. So this was a great overview. I know that for me, I'm learning stuff that I had never seen before. So I'm sure that all our attendees feel the same way. So we do have a few minutes for Q&A. And I just wanted to cover some of these top questions that popped up. One, you mentioned earlier in the presentation, and then one of the key takeaways was building out a center of excellence. Can you talk a little bit about the center of excellence and how that would be used in a Marketo instance?
Sure. So a center of excellence is kind of its own folder and subfolders and programs that are set up in a way so that users have a place to start. So if for your organization, you have a certain way of developing your nurture programs or event programs or even just email newsletter programs, the Center of Excellence is a folder where you have a program set up with all the pieces that your organization would normally use. And then the user can simply clone that program, make whatever adjustments they need to make it their own. And it just kind of takes some of the guesswork out. So rather than building from scratch, they're starting with a program that's mostly set up. So the purpose of the Center of Excellence is to provide some consistency and also make it a little quicker for the users.
Yeah, so that's interesting. That gets us away. I think a lot of people, early on users just clone the last program of one kind. If it was a webinar program, I just cloned the previous one. So it sounds like that kind of single source of truth, gets us away from any mistakes that might carry from program to program as we clone them. So great information. Other questions here we have. So incorporating dynamic content into your email modules. How does using your email modules and how does that play with like segmentation and dynamic content?
So dynamic content is set on the email asset. So it's not on the template side, but you make elements dynamic. So in your email asset, if you've used a module that has a picture and a paragraph, so an image element and a rich text element, you would select each of those elements individually and choose to make them dynamic. So you're not going to make the whole module dynamic, but you could select the picture and choose to show different images depending on the segment, or you could select the rich text element paragraph and choose to make the text dynamic based on segment. So you would do all that after you've created a new email asset from the template.
Great. So follow up to kind of the modules question that you touched on about, trying to account for all the modules that you'll have within your container. Is there a limit? I hear a lot of people sometimes when they're getting, an email created or a new template created, they say, just give me a module for everything. Is there a system performance limit or a limitation on how many modules you can or should have in a template?
I haven't encountered a performance-related limit. I would say that from a user standpoint, having 10 very similar variations may be confusing. So just from a user experience standpoint, you might want to make sure that the modules are distinctive so that it's clear which ones should be used and when, and it's not cluttered with a whole bunch of modules that look the same. But as far as I know, I haven't experienced anything where too many modules in the template make it not work well.
Great. Yeah. And I think it's just one of those questions that, people are learning about the module side and what is the capability, but it sounds like it's more to the usability and eliminating confusion more than anything on that. A question just came in. What determines if one should build tokens into the template or not build tokens into the template?
So it kind of depends on what you're trying to solve for. So a couple of the examples that I shared, so something like a copyright year, you don't want to have to edit that on every single email. So having it as a token built into the template can save some time and avoid any mistakes or missed changes or things like that. And because you can use tokens in the editable areas too, you could in your default text have things like dear first name, just as placeholder content, and that's not holding you to using it because you can simply edit it and remove that token reference. So if there's a type of information that you're going to need to use in any of the email assets for your template, go ahead and build it in. Just keep in mind that you would need to have a value if it's not something that you can edit out. So if it's not in the editable areas, it's not possible to remove it. So make sure that you're not incorporating tokens in a way that it might not always make sense.
Perfect, perfect. Thank you. And lastly, this is always kind of one of the questions that comes up for Q&A. You mentioned, being able to test across multiple email clients, multiple screen sizes and platforms. Are there tools that you have used in your experience? What's some of the things out there that we can use for testing these templates that would make it a little easier to do kind of a usability test?
Sure. So there's a few different systems and tools out there. 250OK is incorporated into Marketo. So that's one that's available, and you can find that. I think it's just an add-on. And then Litmus is another popular one. And both of those offer the advantage of they will create renderings of what your email asset will look like in countless combinations of email clients, browsers, and devices. So it saves you some time because it'll flag any obvious problems. However, I would still recommend that you actually test, make a Gmail account, look at your iPhone, and see what it looks like, just as for a true test. But tools like 250OK or Litmus can really give you that quick overview because you're not going to be able to test every possible combination. But either way, focus on the combinations that seem to be popular among your own audience and focus on making sure that they're rendering well for those.
Perfect. Well, that wraps our Q&A, but I'd like to thank Beth again for introducing us to our new best friend, the templates in Marketo. Those are the things that make a practitioner's life easier day to day. So great content. We will be making these slides and this entire session available following follow-up on demand. So if you missed any portion or you want to go back and review or share with peers, this will be available on demand post-session. I'd like to thank all of our attendees who attended our MOPsCON spring preview sessions. This was the final session of our spring preview. Again, the spring preview is meant to give an idea of the content and the kind of sessions that we will be presenting in the fall full MOPsCON. So there will be more information about MOPsCON in fall coming up for MOPsCON 2020. But since you registered for the spring preview, do check your inboxes. We'll be sending out links to these slide decks, recordings to these presentations, and most importantly, we're going to be sending out a discount code for MOPsCON 2020. So that'll be $150 off your MOPsCON registration for the event later this fall. There's some additional information that will be forthcoming about MOPsCON, including call for speakers. So we'll keep you apprised of that. As we have more information to release. So check your inboxes on that. As a final follow-up, I'd also like to call out, if you haven't had a chance to go to our MOPS Pros Slack group, we invite everybody, MOPS practitioners from all walks of life and all skill levels. The MOPS Pros group is a great place for if you're new to marketing automation or even if you're an old pro. It's just a community group in Slack where we can all get together, talk about marketing operations, talk about marketing automation systems, industry talk. It's a good shop talk forum. If you've got a question or a project or a challenge that you're facing, MOPS Pros is a great place to go in there and get some advice. If you've got a challenge, you're probably not the first one. So there's probably somebody that has seen it, done it, and overcome it. And MOPS Pros is where we all get together and talk about that. So there will be a link to that also in the follow-up email post-session. So with those recordings and the slide deck downloads, we'll also include a link to join the MOPS Pros Slack group. With that, Beth, I'd like to thank you once again. Thanks so much for being our presenter and sharing some insights on templates today.
Oh, thank you so much for having me, and hope everyone is staying well.
Fantastic. I hope we all are too. Well, with that, this concludes our MOPsCON Spring Preview webinar series. Stay tuned. We will be announcing some follow-up webinars shortly, and also more information forthcoming about MOPsCON this fall. So everybody stay well. Thank you again for attending, and please feel free to follow up with any additional questions or requests for information, and I'll be happy to provide that. Thank you all.